Another big-time quarterback recruit has left the state of California to play his college football outside of the Pac-12. What that means for the conference, plus some updates on other big-time recruits that USC is going after, and Washington has been doing quite well on the recruiting trail lately. All that coming up today with the Director of Recruiting for Sports Illustrated. Let's go.
Locked On Pac-12, your daily podcast on the Pac-12 Conference. It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On Pac-12. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin, D1 play-by-play broadcaster. Thanks for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your number one source to stay up to date with the Conference of Champions. Like, comment, subscribe wherever you're listening to or watching the show. We just hit 500 subscribers on the YouTube channel, hundreds more on podcasting platforms. So thank all of you for making this show what it is, and I hope to take it even higher. And a guy who helps me do that is our recruiting guru here at the Locked On Pac-12 at the Locked On Network, and here at the Locked On Pac-12 Podcast. That's John Garcia Jr., the Director of Recruiting for SI. Unfortunately, we missed him last week. I'm sure you all missed him. I know I did, but things are back to normal now because John is here. Good to have you back.
Good to be back, Spencer. And it seems like every school in the Pac-12 has some new commits or targets coming in on a decision. So good timing as always.
Yeah, there have been a lot, and we're going to cover a good number of them here on the show today and in the coming weeks. But I want to start with a big picture question here regarding our beloved Conference of Champions, and that's that another big-time quarterback recruit from the state of California is bolting, this time for the ACC, as Jayden Rashada had Oregon and Cal in his top 7. Never looked like he was seriously considering any other Pac-12 school, and he now goes the way of DJ Uiagalalei going to the ACC, also reminiscent of Bryce Young, who went to Alabama. I don't remember if CJ Stroud is from California.
Yep.
He is. So that's not a great look overall for the conference. You've got these big time signal callers who are saying, I want to go out. So what was your reaction to Rashada deciding to go to the other side of the country, join Mario Cristobal down at Miami? Do you think it was about that connection, and would he have maybe, considered Oregon more heavily had Cristobal stayed with the Ducks, or do you think this was just another case of a top state of California quarterback wants to play college football outside of the Pac-12?
I do think there was a business element of this thing from Rashada's perspective, going to a program like Miami that everyone kind of feels like is on the up and up in the ACC, which is a conference that's much like the Pac-12 in transition. There's not, the Clemson is still there, but beyond that, it feels relatively wide open. And the staff that has been put together at Miami gave Rashada a lot of confidence. Certainly the relationship with Cristobal at the top carried over from Oregon. I think that's the school or the person as a head coach who's recruited him as long as just about anybody that he was considering here down the stretch. But I also think it was the coaches that Cristobal hired. Frank Ponce, the quarterback's coach, is one that Jayden said in 1 hour on the whiteboard with him, he learned as much as he'd learned over a month with other coaches. So he was certainly intrigued by Ponce's vision for what that offense and that position will do. And then the offensive coordinator's the reigning Broyles Award winner in Josh Gaddis. He said he learned a lot from him as well and liked how he was courting the California native. So I think that trio of coaches helped Miami propel over Texas A&M and Florida there at the 11th hour when he pushed back his verbal commitment from the 18th to the 26th. But he talked to Jayden, and man, he is relieved. He was stressed. He lost weight. He's already a slim kid, and he lost weight beyond that. So this was really weighing heavily on him, and pushing it back made sense because you could, in Vegas when we were out there, Spencer, you could feel how overwhelmed he was getting towards. So pushing it back, taking one more visit was certainly something that helped him be a little bit more calculated. And he said the feeling at Miami was different compared to others. And it also reminded him of California, his home. It was the most similar between all these other college campuses. So it was a lot of little things that lined up for Miami, but really it was Cristobal's longstanding relationship and the group of coaches that he hired down to the U, not to mention the upward trajectory of that program relative to their conference. So a little bit of everything in this decision.
There's a lot of talent in the state of California. Even though there are 12 Pac-12 schools, you can't expect them to keep every kid out of the state that's supremely talented, within the Conference of Champions here, as Bill Walton would refer to it as. So that's what we will do as well, because whatever Bill says goes in my book anyway. But it seems like it's been excessive in the last couple of years where you have these big time recruits just not only not choosing a West Coast school, but hardly even considering that. I mean, Cal and Oregon got the boot when Rashada trimmed it down to his final five, and other schools that were, certainly interested in a big time quarterback recruit like that, maybe a USC, a UCLA, and I'm sure I haven't looked at the list recently, but I'm sure he got an offer from a bevy of Pac-12 schools. Really we're never that close to him, it seems, or close to landing him, I should say. Is that a solvable problem for the Pac-12?
Well, Lincoln Riley is going to be a heck of a start in that direction, and I think with this class of 23, he had Malachi Nelson committed at Oklahoma, takes the job at USC, and now you're right in Malachi's backyard in Southern California. So naturally, he followed Lincoln and is committed to the Trojans. Had a really great day out at the Elite 11 to kick it off on
He's
Tuesday,
good.
by the way. Yeah, he's very good. So, yeah, it's going to change, right? Lincoln Riley, I think, pushes it towards that direction. I think some of the other revamped coaching staffs in the Pac-12 are going to try to keep more Californians home. UCLA is going to trot out DTR for the 30th year in a row, but then they brought in Justin Martin last year from Inglewood. So we're seeing a little bit of that trend changing to a smaller degree, while other programs just kind of do their own thing. Oregon's going to recruit nationally at the position. Stanford's always going to recruit nationally at the position. They're very much in it for Dylan Lonergan out of Georgia, who's committing on July 12th between Bama, Stanford, and South Carolina. So other schools are still going to kind of do their own thing, but you expect the USCs, UCLAs of the world to always pull talent and keep them home. I believe a lot of the Pac-12 footprint will look to do the same as well. So I do think it could start to change, mainly because of Riley. But naturally, when you start to potentially project dominance, it usually creates more competition within your own conference. So you could see other Californians looking to stay in that footprint as the profile of the conference theoretically rises between the consistency of Utah, what we think USC could be relatively soon, and the optimism up at Oregon. I think those three programs really have the ball in their court for the conference, and it's important for all of them to kind of trickle up simultaneously, and that will bring more primetime games, more college football playoff appearances, and inevitably more elite quarterbacks looking to stay in their native footprint.
You mentioned UCLA and DTR, and I literally don't know if there's ever been a time in my life where a team has had the same starting quarterback for 5 years in a row. It probably hasn't happened because it hasn't been allowed to happen. Those global pandemic things only come around about once in a century, so we're probably not going to see that again in our lifetimes. But I was just thinking about how if they have a really good, successful year, I feel like that would help you or help UCLA on the recruiting trail, and that's not where Chip has historically wanted to put a lot of his efforts. It's not something that he loves to do. That's why he went to the NFL. But I have to imagine it'll help you make a pitch to quarterbacks when you can see the development that DTR has had over the years. I mean, when he got to UCLA, he'd barely played any quarterback. I mean, he was primarily a receiver in high school and then made the transition late. And when he took his first few snaps in a Bruins uniform in 2018, you looked at it and went, yeah, I see the talent, I see the potential, but I also see the work that needs to be done. And if he comes out and has a second team All Pac-12 caliber season, which I think he certainly could, I think that would help them. I think that would help them a great deal in that sense. But also Chip has to be willing at some point to go out and really grind on the recruiting trail the way everybody else is going to, because If you're not getting better, you're getting worse, and I think that applies to UCLA recruiting. It's not as if the potential isn't there. I mean, you're in Los Angeles, sure, you're second fiddle to USC, but you're still in Los Angeles, and there's plenty of talent there. Another California guy who's looking at some Pac-12 schools is five-star edge Matayo Uiagalalei. John and I will talk about him after I talk to you about Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure pointless or intimidating questioning when you could just save time and money using Rock Auto? Reliably low prices for every customer. They're a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. So we're talking about Jayden Rashada, and he's a big-time recruit at the quarterback position who, once again, leaving the state of California. But as I said, there's a lot of talent in the state of California, and a few more so in the class of 2023 than DJ's younger brother, Matayo Uiagalalei, five-star edge prospect, who it looks like is not going to join his brother at Clemson. They don't appear to be one of the final schools in the running there, but two Pac-12 schools are, Oregon and USC, both after him. Where does each school respectively stand with Matteo?
Similarly expensive. Both programs obviously under new management. His father, Dave, told me under the previous administrations, it was looking like they were headed east for college. Ohio State, Clemson, certainly Alabama. One of those schools looked like they could be, the school for Mateo. But since Dan Lanning went to Oregon and since Lincoln Riley arrived at USC, that tune has changed. And now, like you said, the Pac 12 appears to be the most likely destination for Uiagalalei. And I think that's huge news for the conference because it wasn't just quarterbacks leaving California. It was kind of everyone, right? Because, they hadn't been in the playoff in so long, and there had been so many question marks around the development of some of these programs that a lot of skill position and defensive talent started to bolt for the SEC and the Big Ten, among other conferences. So I do think that's huge news for the Pac-12 in general. And again, right now, if you had to guess, you would say that he's more likely to end up in the Pac-12 than otherwise. Ohio State, Alabama, they're still out there. Ohio State in particular hosted him. They've got, a Polynesian connection that's building out in Ohio State that most people probably don't realize given their location in Columbus, Ohio. But obviously, USC and Oregon has that, in droves from previous administrations and current administrations alike. And I think USC in particular has done a really good job kind of commanding this recruitment at this time. The question is, though, when is he going to decide? And I think that's really where it could come down to, Ohio State making an upset bid here. If it goes longer, you feel better, certainly, about the Buckeyes' chances. But if he reverses his course and wants to come off the board a little bit sooner, I think he's staying in the Pac-12. Oregon's done a really good job. They just hosted him on a huge official visit weekend up in Eugene. We know Tosh Lupoy, Dan Lanning in particular, extremely high on Uiagalalei. They're selling it the right way. And then USC is the local option, right? Obviously, a ton of local ties. We know what the expectation is going to be pretty much now for USC. That is something that is attractive to recruits, not just on offense, but all over the field, potentially for the Trojans. And I think that's part of the reason why Uiagalalei to USC probably has the most traction of all his options at this point. Though, again, the timeline's wide open, and it could create more fluctuation before all is said and done. But in terms of keeping a guy in the Pac-12, this is one that the Pac-12 has to win. We don't talk about conferences having to win a recruitment. This is one of them nationally. The Pac-12 has got to keep Matayo Uiagalalei in its footprint. And I do think at this stage, that's the most likely scenario.
You're relying on your two biggest brands to do it, and certainly from a conference perspective, you'd hate to see a guy that talented. And his brother hasn't quite lived up to the hype of the quarterback position yet, but we'll see if he's able to make the leap here in year two. But he's certainly the sort of guy who would show up on campus and start playing on day one, and probably be a high impact player as well. Let's talk about USC, and they're kind of going big game hunting in the recruiting space, and that's what Trojan fans expect, and I think that's excuse me, what they should expect. And a couple names that they've been tied to in the class of 2023: Malik Bryant, Nichols Harbor, and then one of whom is on the offensive side of the ball of the three we're talking about, but that's Zechariah Branch. We'll get to him, but let's start with the two defensive guys. Malik Bryant, linebacker, a position where USC added Alabama transfer Shane Lee, but going forward, it's a place where they're going to need to recruit more so than they have in the past. So, do the Trojans have a decent chance here with Bryant?
I think a decent chance. His commitment's coming July 23rd, and I think that creates a little bit more angst. But look, you got him on campus, and you've got a puncher's chance at this point. His recruitment has shifted. I think 6 months ago, this was a very confident Florida Gator recruit from Orlando, which has a little bit of a Gator vibe to it in the state of Florida. And then it shifted towards Alabama. He took a trip to Tuscaloosa. Nick Saban latched onto him. He's a great pass rusher who could also play off-ball linebacker, something that Alabama's done as well as anyone in the country over the last few years. The vibe shifted there. Since it's shifted down to Miami a little bit, there's growing confidence in Coral Gables. So it's kind of this regional, local battle, SEC, ACC, and then there's USC, the total outlier. Malik is more of a reserved kid. He's going to do his own thing. So when you look at a kid who's going to go against the grain, obviously he needs to be talented enough to be a national recruit, but he also needs to kind of have that mentality like, I'm going to bet on myself. So I do think that he has the foundation of what you need to pull a kid away from the SEC and away from a top ACC contender like Miami for USC. I don't know if the timeline helps or hurts the Trojans, but that buzz has shifted considerably more than once or twice. So I do think there's potential with almost a month until he pops for it to shift one more time. And USC certainly held his attention when he was able to get out to LA.
Nichols Harbor is one of the top uncommitted prospects in the class of 2023, five-star edge guy, a little bit like Matayo Uiagalalei. So if you're USC, who's very much in the running there, perhaps in the lead, as you were saying earlier, for Matteo at this point in time, it's not as if, it's not like a quarterback situation where you bring in one, you think, okay, we don't need to bring in any more. I mean, you take all the defensive linemen that you can get, and Alex Grinch, I'm sure, certainly knows that. So Harbor, I mean, he's kind of one of the biggest fish left in the pond right now for 2023. So where does USC stand with him?
They're right in the thick of it. And this is not only one of the most unique kids, talking 6'4", 6'5", running a 10.29 100-meter dash, but also one of the most unique recruitments where it's like nobody really has a great idea of where this kid is leaning, mainly because of track. He wants to play football and run track. So you wonder if the development in one sport, meaning track and field, could hurt in the other sport, as he's an edge prospect that probably will need to gain some weight. But this is one of the twitchiest, fastest, freakiest, any adjective you want to throw out there. He's one of those guys who you just kind of have to double take. You head turn towards him like, wait, 10? He's running 10.2 with the size of like Jadeveon Clowney. Like, what do you mean? Like, he is so unique. He is so unique as a prospect that it's created a true fever pitch of buzz. It's like he's like the defensive Arch Manning, where it's like people just want to shoot their shot with him. He's recently narrowed the list, though. Oregon, where you understand the track vibes there. USC are the West Coast options. And then back in the East Coast, there's like Georgia, Alabama, and Michigan. It's totally a wide open and unconventional recruitment in both his athletic profile and the schools he's looking at, and not to mention the desire to run track. So it is a totally unique recruitment. I don't believe there's a concrete decision date set just yet. So I get the sense he's going to take visits well into the fall, and that could keep his recruitment as kind of unknown as any big time recruit maybe that we've seen in the last few years. Usually it's like this school is the lead. Maybe this is the top contender. With Harbor, it has shifted and changed over multiple months, and I think that's going to continue during the season if he's still uncommitted, which is what I would expect at this point.
The guy who you told me earlier is rated as your top slot receiver in the class of 2023. Right now is verbally committed to the Trojans. That's Zechariah Branch. He's part of the two prospects in the top 10 in next year's recruiting cycle that USC has right now, of course, joining Malachi Nelson, who is, I think, I'm not saying Arch Manning is not going to be very good, but from what I've seen so far, if I had to choose between the two, I would go with Malachi Nelson. And Trojan fans are hoping he'll be throwing the ball to Zechariah Branch, and he's committed to the Trojans right now. But you had some news on that front.
Yeah, he took a visit to Texas A&M, kind of out of left field. I mean, look, A&M's been able to pull California talent, but really since Branch committed to USC very early on in the Lincoln Riley tenure, there really hasn't been any information regarding his recruitment. He's a Bishop Gorman kid in Vegas, so he can swing up to Los Angeles, excuse me, pretty easily and consistently. His older brother is on the Trojan roster as a safety, one of the best safeties in the class last year. So nobody really glanced at other schools trying to talk to him, although Florida, Texas A&M, Alabama, a lot of schools certainly understand his talent. And again, number one slot receiver in the country. I mean, true juice at that position that likens a little bit to Mario Williams, ironically, the USC slot receiver of today. But then all of a sudden, a couple weeks ago, he sets this official visit to Texas A&M. He took the trip this past weekend, and I got to say, earlier today, I got a phone call. There's a little bit of confidence that's building in College Station with the potential to flip him. I don't think it's the most likely scenario. Maybe he takes other visits and he's just doing due diligence because, look, everyone expects, with your brother there and with that being the school and bringing in Lincoln Riley for your skill set, everyone just kind of thought, USC, nobody else in this recruitment. So maybe he wants to do due diligence to push against that. And other schools will get him on campus for visits. That remains to be seen. But he took the A&M trip, and they feel a little bit better about their chances for a flip. And obviously, having signed the number one class just a year ago, I mean, that's never a school anybody should look past on offense or defense. I mean, last year they signed Evan Stewart, arguably the number one receiver in the country, and that was an upset. A lot of people expected him to end up elsewhere. So it's not just great defensive players that are being brought in to College Station. So it's certainly something to keep an eye on from the USC angle. But, his brother's on the roster, Lincoln Riley. He's tight with Malachi Nelson. I mean, there's a lot of things still pushing things the Trojans' way very heavily. But obviously it's recruiting, and these are teenagers. These things can change in a hurry. So just something to keep an eye on.
Well, Washington football has had a busy worker bee month of June, and we're just going to scratch the surface on that, and we'll probably have to revisit for a full rundown next week. But first, I have to tell you that BetOnline is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. You can find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's NHL playoffs, which have since passed. Congrats to the Colorado Avalanche there, and Major League Baseball. Go Mariners. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season, and it's the fastest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline is where the game starts. So as we're recording this, John, literally minutes before we hopped on, Washington got a quarterback commit in the class of 2023. And again, I don't want to shortchange, going in depth on the recruiting success they've had. So let's just kind of talk big picture here. Right now, the Huskies are in the top 20 nationally at a high school composite rating. And I was talking about this very recently here on the show, with regards to the potential that Kalen DeBoer has as the head coach. And when I was talking about the recruiting potential, I'm looking at the past classes under Chris Peterson when they were, kind of at their peak, got to the college football playoff, still the last Pac-12 team to accomplish that mark. They were in the top 20 nationally. I mean, that's where they can get to, and that's where they're sitting right now. They had 4 commits coming into the month of June. Now here we are at the end of it, and they're going to go into July, which is going to continue to be a busy recruiting season with 14. I mean, that's a really good sign if you're a Husky fan, isn't it?
Absolutely. And this is really where we've been waiting for this, right? I mean, this is something that, like you said, people have been asking questions like DeBoer is an offensive guy known for quarterbacking, and he hadn't landed a quarterback in this class until today, where they got Lincoln Keyholtz out of South Dakota. That might not sound flashy or sexy, but this was a kid who was rising nationally as a quarterback recruit. Wisconsin and North Dakota State were all in on this kid, and you understand, hey, big time Big Ten football, and obviously the Bison, speaks for itself in terms of even what they've done at the quarterback position over the last decade or so. So to win that battle with Keyholtz against those programs, which have a ton more stability and a lot more kind of tangible, this is what we want success. I think that says a ton about the future of this program. And then beyond Keyholtz, how about going into California? 8 prospects out of these 14 Huskies that are committed are from the state of California, an obvious pipeline and a need and an expectation given the history of DeBoer, especially coming from Fresno State just last year. So 2 of the boxes we've been waiting for Washington to check have been checked. You throw in another class headliner like Anthony James, a former Texas A&M commitment who had buzz for other programs, just like Keyholtz did at quarterback, but he ends up popping for the Huskies. Auburn was really high on Anthony James. So again, you're winning a battle that you weren't really expected to in very short order after he decommitted from A&M. So some really marquee wins, and I think DeBoer deserves a lot of credit, that reassembled staff as well, and even some of the recruiting staffers. Courtney Morgan, I know, is one of the rising stars in the industry. He deserves some love here as well, as Washington has totally turned around the perception of this class of 2023 at key spots, flipping SEC recruits, winning a quarterback battle, and playing very, very consistently in the state of California. 3 things you have to do to get back to where we know Washington can be.
Yeah, their recruiting had fallen off, and the on-field results, of course, fell off pretty hard in 2021 with a 4-8 season. But the early returns, and I was really talking about recruiting just not that long ago, asking the question, like, is he going to be able to recruit the way Washington's capable? And they are shooting up those rankings. If that continues to be the case, then he will certainly have Washington fans feeling good, as he should. And we always feel good when we get the chance to chat with John Garcia Jr., the director of recruiting for Sports Illustrated. We will see you next week and every week from there on after.
Sounds good, my friend. Thanks for having me again.
I appreciate everyone listening. See you next time, and have a wonderful rest of your day.